Hi everyone, it's Ash from Fplhints, back with some more preseason FPL content ahead of the 24-25 season. As always, if you're able to like, share and subscribe, that would be greatly appreciated. Now then, the talk of the town on FPLX seems to be this massive drive towards a no Haaland draft. And it's something that was really talked up even before the game went live when we knew that Haaland's price would be £15 million. And no doubt, in my estimation, as we get closer towards the game week 1 deadline, his ownership will gradually creep up. Haaland's ownership was 80% plus this time last season, well, in preseason. And looking at his ownership at this moment in time for all players at percentage level, he's barely passing 30%. There he is, 32.6%. Isak with over 50%, and also with Watkins as well. So clearly, Haaland isn't in vogue at the moment. And often the narrative of the no Haaland camp will say that, well, look at the points from last season. Haaland was not one of the, he wasn't the top FPL point scorer among the strikers. They'll say Watkins got 228 points, Haaland got 217 points. But that doesn't tell the full story, of course. After all, Haaland was injured for a significant amount of the season. And of course, they'll mention Palmer's points and Foden's points as well. But of course, midfielders get more points for the goal. But the reality is that when you look at it at a goal level in FPL last season, Haaland, let's get it up here, was the top goal scorer by 6 clear goals among the strikers. And Watkins, who was the top FPL point scorer, he scored 8 goals less than Haaland. But of course, with Watkins, the benefit that he had during the 23-24 season was that he also chipped in with 18 assists. So what I'm going to do is create a draft for you that doesn't include Haaland, and we can weigh up the pros and cons of each of the players that I'm going to select. And we'll also go through the approach that I would take if I was to go down this path. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. And caveat here, this isn't actually an update to my first draft. It's purely an illustration. I will be providing a further update to my own FPL draft in the days ahead. So this is just a hypothetical, basically, to answer that question that is being asked across FPL Twitter. And I feel that, of course, there's no right way to play FPL, but I kind of feel that some people have taken a very extreme approach to the no Haaland approach. So I just wanted to offer a different perspective, and I'm happy to explain each and every one of my hypothetical picks as well. Another point I want to actually raise, just as a matter of coincidence, this time last year, I also basically did a no Haaland draft, and that's when he was like at 80% plus ownership. And it's something that really wasn't talked up back then because he just seemed like a no nonsense pick. I don't want to go through the entirety of that draft. You can see that back then you could fit in Mohamed Salah, get Rashford, who of course had a sensational 22-23 season, get Foden in there, Mitoma, who also had a good 22-23 season, and also Saka as well, who continued his form from 22-23 into 23-24. You can see that with the defence, got a Stupinan, Alexander-Arnold, Gabriel, so a fairly robust team. But in terms of the strikers, the reason why I've kind of like cropped that off is this was before Harry Kane moved to the Bundesliga to Bayern Munich. So he was the main striker. So that kind of like effectively became a non-starter for me. But it's something that I have approached in the past as well. So let's get straight into it now. You've decided you're not going to pick Haaland in your team. And, fair play to you. If you don't have Haaland for the start of the season, you're not going to get whacked with a worrisome 150 to 200% effective ownership problem. And if you don't know what effective ownership is, I'll put a link in the description below for those that are new among us. So you're not going to get Haaland. The first name on your team sheet clearly has to be Ollie Watkins. because there are a lot of FPL drafts that have Haaland but don't have Ollie Watkins. So you've got the funds and you're going to get him. And of course, with Ollie Watkins, he of course played in the latter stages of the Euros with England, but the key thing here is he had very limited game time. So whilst there is a concern that his X-Mins could be limited in game week 1, you're pretty hopeful that because he wasn't really, unfortunately, starting in most of those games, or didn't start in any of those games, that there's a good chance he'll start in game week 1. And he's got those green block fixtures to get you going as well. West Ham away, got Leicester away in game week 3, Everton at home, Wolves at home, and Ipswich away. So I think that all looks fairly no nonsense to me. So in he comes to this draft. And moving on from Ollie Watkins, I want to come on to an Arsenal forward now. And in this instance, I'm going to pick Havertz, who has been reclassified from a midfielder to a forward. So just going to get him there. There he is. Now, you're probably thinking, there we go. So you've got Havertz, you've got Watkins, you're now going to pick Isak. And that would be the logical way of going about it. And I've actually got Havertz, Haaland, and Isak in my current draft. But actually, I'm going to try and keep it as balanced as possible because I want a fairly robust power 7 attack. And if I get Isak in as my forward, then the midfield could get a bit ropey, probably get like 3 premium-ish midfielders and then have like literally 4.0, 4.5 defenders. And I don't want to do that here. I want a balanced no Haaland draft. So in this instance, I'm going to do something different and I'm going to pick a forward that has a 4.5 million price tag. And there aren't really that many that even have a chance of starting. But the one that I'm going to just pick, I mean, I'll even sort it by percentage as well. And you've got Fraser, got Ladapo, Wejo, Stewart, but Cannon is the one I'm picking. Of course, newly promoted Leicester, highly unlikely to start, but I'm pretty certain he's featured in about 13 or 14 league games for Leicester last season. Really dud sub material here. He'll be the sub 3, so hopefully I won't need to rely upon him, but it's just to make the jigsaw fit with having a power 7 attack. So Havertz and Watkins are my starters up top. Onto my midfield now for this no Haaland draft. Clearly, Mohamed Salah has to be in. And I've seen a lot of managers actually. I did a poll where I asked, are you no Haaland and no Salah? Are you just no Salah? Are you just no Haaland? Or do you have both? And to my surprise, a considerable number of FPL managers actually refer, you know what, we're not going to get either of those. And to my surprise, I'm thinking, well, you're not going to pick Haaland, you're not going to pick Salah, then who on earth are you going to pick? And the argument that they would make is that you're actually going to have a lopsided team, even if you have one of those players. And for me, that's a real hard thing to justify. Just feel that just seems a bit too risky not having either of those, considering the pedigree. Just add up the number of goals scored, the number of assists they've done over the past couple of seasons at least, and it just makes sense to have one or the other. I get it. Both of them in your team, yeah, that's a considerable chunk of your budget, but to not have any of them, it's going to really potentially cause you problems if their ownership's even 30% plus for both. It's something that you don't want to really be worrying about when they've got Ipswich at home or another newly promoted team. So just do factor that in as well. And I've got the poll actually just to contextualize what I'm talking about as well. The question I asked was, which one applies to your draft right now? Those that had Haaland and Salah, just under 30%. No Mohamed Salah, 13.5%. No Haaland, 36.1%, of course with a higher price tag. But with no Haaland and no Salah, that's just over 20%. I kind of feel that that is quite high, but fair play if that's the approach that some managers want to take. I'm pretty certain that the no Haaland and no Salah percentage will massively drop towards game week 1. In particular, the no Haaland one will drop as well. But pre-season and I guess people willing to take risks in the earlier drafts, but that will no doubt change, like I've said, as we get closer towards mid-August. So back to my hypothetical no Haaland draft. Cannon, of course, is the dud sub. Watkins, Havertz, and Mohamed Salah. And the other player that I'm going to pick, again, you're not going to have Haaland in your team. You're going to get Phil Foden. And with Phil Foden, like we've alluded to with him, he had his best ever season in the Premier League for goal involvements, 27. He had 18 the season before. So the chances are that if you don't have Haaland, that Foden is the cover player, I guess. In some cases for Mohamed Salah, for those that don't have him, they'll probably get a Trent or um, another attacking Liverpool player. But Foden is a no-nonsense pick if you're not going to get Mohamed Salah. And then that brings me on to my next power player, someone who I may not be able to get if I've got Haaland. Clearly, it has to be Cole Palmer. Cole Palmer had a sensational Euros considering his limited X-Mins, 35 goal involvements. Of course, his price has gone up more than double, but you don't have Haaland. You're going to have Mohamed Salah. You're going to have Palmer. You're going to have Foden. So I think that makes perfect sense there. On to my fourth midfield pick. I did talk about Isak. The issue with him is does cost considerably more than what he did last season, but you want some sort of attacking Newcastle United cover, especially with the opening run of games. In comes Anthony Gordon, and of course with Gordon, 7.5 million, he's cheaper than Isak. You're looking at his history, 27 goal involvements last season. A massive chunk of them were at home. You look at the opening fixtures, home to Southampton, away to Bournemouth. You've got away to Wolves in game week 4 and away to Fulham. So reasonable opening games. Feels like a no-nonsense pick. Now, I could at this point then choose another player who's 6.5 or 7 million, but that will make the defense lopsided. So the player that I'm going to opt for will be a 5.5 million player who I would almost certainly start in those opening games, and someone who actually had a reasonable end for the season during 23-24, and that's Hudson-Odoi, 5.5 million. Looking at what his return tally was, 8 goals and 2 assists. The minutes played might seem problematic to you, but if I just show you this here, how he was doing from early Feb onwards in the Premier League, you can see he was getting regular minutes. 2 instances where he didn't start but got minutes, that was early to mid-March, but pretty much from early Feb up until the end of the season, he was playing full matches for Nottingham Forest, and the number of goals he scored in that period was 7. And just as a reminder, so that's 7 goals in that period from early Feb to the end of the season. And as I mentioned, he had scored 8 goals across the entirety of the season, so clearly ended the season on a high. And you look at Nottingham Forest's fixtures, arguably among all teams, the fixture run seems quite generous for the first 6. Bournemouth at home, Southampton away, Wolves at home, tricky one at Liverpool, possible tricky one at the Amex, and then got Fulham at home. He's definitely one worth considering. And what that basically means is that I can spread the funds across the defence, but I've got 7 starters who I can definitely pick for those opening run of games without Haaland. And of course, if there is a worry that Haaland goes absolutely like goal crazy in those opening games, then no doubt you probably want to build up 2 free transfers or even 3 and then get Haaland in without a hit. But that is the power 5 attack that I can field. And arguably, Havertz, Watkins, Mohamed Salah, Palmer, Foden, you've got 4 captains there as well, and Gordon to some extent as well. So you could spread the captaincy around. It's not like, oh, you've just got Haaland, just have to captain him to make the money count. So there is that, like, I guess, points per million aspect with these picks as well, that you can really unlock value with those options. Now, onto the defense. Like I've said, with the money that we have at hand, I'm just showing the budget as well. Got 33 million to go for the remaining 7 players. And just on the Man City theme, like I've said, you're not going to have Haaland in your team. That's completely fine. So you want to get some more Man City cover. And clearly, one player who arguably probably is a bit underpriced, it's Guardiola. So in he comes, £6 million. And of course, finished the season on a high as well. 4 goals and 2 assists. Just couldn't stop scoring towards the end of the season. No nonsense pick. Does that logic of having Guardiola and Foden cover Haaland? I think some might say it potentially does, but I think it's a no-nonsense choice with their opening run of games as well. And it doesn't even really matter with Man City. They are fixture-proof to some extent as well. So in he comes. On to my next defensive pick, another premium defender that you're able to afford at the budget that's available. So 27 with 6 to go, going to Arsenal, and it's going to be Saliba. Now, there's an argument that Arsenal's defence might have a bit more rotation this season. And if you want someone who's arguably relatively safe, there's really 2 picks you can go for here, David Raya or Saliba. And I'll come on to who I would pick instead. But I feel with Saliba, there was a slight goal threat as well, albeit less so for most of last season. You could say that Gabriel kind of like in some respects did more on that front, but Saliba has got something about him. One of the safest defences, well, the safest defence in the Premier League last season. Some might say that, well, Arsenal have a tricky run of games, but you're not going to really worry too much about that, especially with the run that they went on the clean sheet front last season. So in comes Saliba. So on to my next pick now. I'm going to go to Manchester United. Again, not really a bastion of clean sheets, but you'd hope that they've probably turned a corner towards the end of last season. But who knows? So with Manchester United, I'm going to pick a player who kind of gets hard pressed sometimes, and it is Lisandro Martinez. Looking at the minutes played, somewhat limited, but then that was for different reasons. 4.5 million. If he does start, and with Manchester United's opening run of games, look at that. Fulham, got Brighton, Southampton, Palace. Definitely an option to start. And even if Martinez doesn't start, you look at the other options there as well. There might be 1 or 2 others in the 4.5 million bracket for United, but I think Martinez could offer some potential value, albeit there's no real attacking threat there as well. And that brings me onto the remaining defenders. I want to fill in with some 4.0 defenders now. So again, wouldn't want to start them, but you just want them as your sub 1, sub 2 fodder in the event that they're relied upon for just random reasons. So going to Leicester, regular starter in the Championship. Now, in seasons gone by, a regular Championship starter who got newly promoted would automatically be 4.5 million, but FPL have fudged up the prices to make those players £4 million. Can't complain. In he comes. The other player is Southampton's Harwood Bellis. Again, got regular minutes last season, £4 million. In he comes. That leaves me with 8.5 million with 2 picks to go. So clearly one's going to be a dud sub goalkeeper. There isn't really one who's likely to start as of now from the options that we've got among the 4.0 million goalkeepers. But just to show you the percentages, Turner very highly owned. Oh, beg your pardon. Let me pop that to 4 million. So Turner's 4 million, unlikely to start. Fabianski, probably unlikely as well. We've got Danny Ward there. There isn't really anyone that really stands out. 2 Leicester goalkeepers there. So just Turner on the off chance that Sells has a bad game and doesn't get a chance. But yeah, you're not going to really get any 4.0s as of now. Leaves me with 4.5 million in the bank and a player who unfortunately had a bad injury towards the middle of last season, which affected his minutes, but someone who has been reported to be the number one. It is Sanchez of Chelsea. Of course, got tricky opening game against Manchester City. But then you've got a flurry of green block games from game week 2 to game week 7. Hopefully, about game week 8 or 9, you might even be wildcarding at this point as well. So hopefully, someone you can rely upon for those opening fixtures. And just to show you the budget, I've not cheated, no fake figures here. 15 out of 15, and that's the budget maxed out, which kind of leaves me with my famous super zoom in for this hypothetical no Haaland draft, which isn't my official draft, but it's something that I wanted to just talk about because I feel that people have been taking different approaches and fair play to them. But if you are going to go without Haaland and you're kind of locked yourself in on that approach, then surely on the goalkeeping front, you'd pick Sanchez as your budget goalkeeper. And although it's not the season for premium defenders, that you've got a real good opportunity to get a Gvardiol and a Saliba in as well. I mean, with Gvardiol, if you want to downsize him, get a 5.5 million Man City defender as well, so be it. But I feel, with Gvardiol, Saliba, fixture proof, you could just start them from start to finish. So I think they make perfect sense. And then Martinez, again, bit of a maverick pick, but he's got the proven pedigree off the high of winning Copa America as well. So I think he's definitely worth considering as the third defender. Of course, with Vice and Harwood, you'd be very unlikely to start them at all in this iteration, but you've got the peace of mind that in the event one of your other defenders have a no-show, that you'd get like at least cameo points for Vice or Harwood Bellis. Onto the midfield, you've got Foden at 9.5 million. Let's just add up the goal involvements from last season as well for that midfield and the attack as a whole. You've got 27 goal involvements with Foden. And you've got Palmer, again, with his goal involvements as well from last season. That's 35 for him. And then you've got Anthony Gordon, again, 27 as well. So just from those 3 players alone, purely on the goal involvements front, you're looking at 89 goal involvements from last season. Mohamed Salah, again, didn't have exactly the most vintage season last season, but still ended up with 30 goal involvements. So you add that in as well. 119 goal involvements. And then Hudson-Odoi, again, we talked about how it was really from early Feb that he got going, had the chances, but that's another 10 goal involvements there. So just from the midfield alone, you've got a power 5 that have contributed to 129 goal involvements. Onto the forwards now. Got Kai Havertz, had a good season despite Arsenal falling short. That's 23 goal involvements for him. Brings us up to 152. And then lastly, you got Watkins, and we mentioned that he got 19 goals and 18 assists, 37 goal involvements. That's 189 goal involvements from that Power 7 alone. There you go. That's how you unlock value by not having Haaland in your draft. Can you do better? Please let me know in the comments below. I would be shocked if you could get more goal involvements than 189 from a power 7 with a no Haaland draft. The only way you could do it is if you completely cheapened out on Gvardiol and Saliba, and then you picked like a 6.5 maybe forward, or even a 6.0 get Wood in, but then you're losing the balance. What I've literally showed you with this draft, without Haaland, is that you can have a very balanced team, and that team can have a lot of goal involvements, but then it's not like one of those drafts where you've got a Ferrari front and you've got like a budget car at the back. This is a Ferrari front, and then on top of that, you've got effectively an almost Ferrari back. So I think I'm fairly happy with that. I think that I've been able to justify all of these picks in this hypothetical no Haaland draft. But like I've said, I'm not locking this down as my updated draft because, for the time being at least, I'm content with having Haaland in my squad. And one of the reasons why I have him is because I feel that having Haaland and Mohamed Salah from the get go, it's easier to downsize from an informed player that costs less than it is to go the other way around. And all this talk about, oh, but you've got Mohamed Salah and you've got Haaland. Well, you've got two captains. Why have you got two super expensive players? And the same argument could be said about the players that I've got in this draft, where, well, you've got like 4 or 5 captains, and is that an issue for you? Of course it isn't. Ultimately, you want to pick the players that will give you the most value for money. And I will concede that, look, this is a points per million season. This is a season where team value will be valued more so than it has been in previous years. It's almost like a dying art in some respects in FPL, but with the way that the players are priced this season, you can't have them all. So you need to be careful with your picks. And with this, I've demonstrated that with the right approach, with a no Haaland draft, you can certainly get bang for your buck. As always, if you're able to like, share, and subscribe, that would be greatly appreciated. And really keen to hear your thoughts on this. Have I got the balance right? Have I got the balance wrong? And if so, why? Take care and all the best.